So in this video, we'll be looking at how you can enhance the eyes. In the last video where we were looking at dodging and burning, we saw how we could enhance the eyes by adding a little bit of shadow at the top of the eye there, and then highlighting or lightening this bottom area of the eye. Basically, with the structure of the eye, if the light is coming from the top, we should see a bit of a shadow created by the top lid, and then normally when the light hits the pupil, it'll bounce out and we'll get more light happening at the bottom of the eye. We can emphasize that by using an adjustment layer, and that way we can actually draw in and add extra highlights to the eye. You can even go as far as changing some of the colors. So again, we want to do this in a non-destructive way. So we're going to work with an adjustment layer that we can use for brightening the eyes. And I'll come across to my adjustments layer and I'll use the curves layer to do that. So I'll just click on the curves layer. We can see it adds the curves adjustment there. I might just rename that one eyes. So I've got that saved, and then we'll come over to the properties for the adjustment. And what I'm going to do is just grab the midtones here as part of my histogram and drag those midtones up so that it lightens the entire image. So we can see the whole image is blowing out there, but we're not too concerned about that. We're just focusing on what the eyes are looking like. So that's quite bright. What I might do then is come across to my layers panel and select the thumbnail for the mask that's associated with this adjustment layer. And I'm going to fill that mask with black, which, as we know with masking, that will essentially hide the effect across the image. And then what we can do is come back in and paint in black so that we reveal some of this brightness back into the eyes. So I'll come across and use my edit menu to fill that mask with 100% black. Click OK, so that's hiding that adjustment we just created. And then this is usually best done zoomed in a little bit closer, so I'll get in closer to the eyes there. We'll work on just this left eye here. And what we're going to do is start painting in some light along the bottom of the iris here. So I'll come across, I'll grab the make sure I've got the paintbrush tool or the brush tool selected there. I'll come down and make sure that I've got the mask selected as well in my layers panel. You want to make sure that the thumbnail for the mask is selected. And because we're wanting to reveal that adjustment of brightness, we want to make sure that we've got white selected there as our highlight color for our brush. Coming up again to the settings for the brush, making sure the brush is small enough so that it can work within the iris. So I'm going to reduce that brush size right down. And in this case, probably working at a size of about 6 pixels is good. And then in terms of the hardness, I'll probably take it down to about 50%. So it's got a slight soft edge. The opacity, I'll maybe take the opacity of this down to about 60% so that I can slowly sort of build it up. And then what I can do is come down and start painting over the area that I want to brighten. So in brightening eyes using this method, what we can do is actually just follow the radius around the eye. Where we've got the iris, we want to just make sure that we're following from the center of the eye out. And so I'll start just by creating a click and drag like that to create a stroke. And I'm just creating these lines coming from the center of the eye out. Now, because this is using a mask, it doesn't matter if I go overboard because I can always switch back to using black ink to pull away from some of this color. And in fact, it doesn't even matter if I extend out into the eye outside of the iris, because what I can do is come back in and paint back in areas where I've gone too far. And I might do a few more little subtle highlights, shorter strokes there, and then bring them around a little bit further. I can always again paint these back out. Okay, so now that I've added a little bit of highlight there, if I turn that layer off, we can see that's where it was. This is where it is now. And then if I want to sort of soften the edges that we've got around the iris here, then what I'll do is I'll actually put this eyes adjustment layer into a group. So I'll come down, I'll hit the group layer here. Again, I'm just going to rename this one eyes. And within here, we're going to add a mask to the group. So I'll come down and I'll hit the new layer mask there. So we can see that that's added my layer mask, which is associated with the group. And then that way, what I can do is paint on the group in black, which will hide any of these effects where I don't want the brightness outside of the pupil. It's important that I make sure that the eyes adjustment is sitting inside that group. I'll just drag that to make sure that it is actually within the group. We can see it's indented there, so it is part of the group. And then I'm just making sure that I've got the mask for the group selected. Then coming across, making sure with my brush tool that I've got the fill color set to black, because I'm going to start hiding the effect around here. And I'll just increase the size of the brush a little bit there. And I'll also take the opacity up to 100%. And so now when I'm brushing on the mask for the group, we can see that I can actually pull some of those highlights there back a little bit so they're not intruding into the area outside of the iris. And I can even get rid of some of the ones that are up the top here. And now we've got that eye that has been enhanced just at the bottom. What we can also do is go into the settings for the adjustment and adjust the histogram. So if I go back to the layers panel, click on the settings for the histogram that I've got here associated with that adjustment layer that we used for curves, and we can see within the properties of the curves layer, I've got the ability to play around with the red, green and blue settings. So with these eyes, there's a bit of green in them there. So I could go to the green area, for example, and then I could pull that green up, and you can see how that's adding more green into the eyes. You may want to take it out. I could actually drag it down and it's going to bring more red into the eyes if I do that. So you can actually enhance certain colors within the eyes if you're wanting more of a dramatic effect. I can add more blue in there, or I can pull the blue out. And so yeah, you could do this on a separate layer again and play around with different colors that you may want to enhance within the eye. So now that I've done the left eye, what I'll do is just come across to the right eye, and I can still use this same adjustment layer and the same group to run the adjustment on this eye. So I'll just come across, and again using my brush, making sure that I've got white set as my foreground color and my opacity there set up at 100% and also the brush at the right size. I'll just come in and I'll drag some of these lines out. I might reduce the size of the brush down a little bit on some of these, and then just do a few little variations in size there. Okay, and then coming back up to my group settings there, I'm going to switch over to my black ink, increase the size of my brush that I've got there, and then I'll just brush away where that light extends too far out from the iris there. And then I'll just zoom out on that, and we can see how that has created more of a dramatic look in the eyes. And I can turn that on and off there. We can see what it was like before and then after. If you find that's too intense, then you can always just change the opacity level of your group by coming up to our opacity there and then just dragging that down so that it's not quite as obvious. But yeah, that's one way that we can create more emphasis around the eyes.